Welcome to the GovDiscovery AI podcast with Mike Shanley, your source for actionable insight into government markets and foreign policy. GovDiscovery AI leverages a decade of experience winning federal funding to deliver intel to sales, proposal, and capture teams working in defense and civilian markets. Now here's your host, Mike Shanley.
Welcome to the GovDiscovery AI podcast. I'm your host, Mike Shanley. Today, our guest is Dan Tadross, head of public sector at Scale AI, and former Marine Corps major and former program manager for Joint Warfighting National Mission Initiative. Dan, great to have you on the podcast today.
Yeah, great to be here. Good to talk with you today.
Well, let's get right into it. During our prep, we talked about your experience with AI in the defense market going back pre-Scale AI. Could you talk about when you first started engaging with AI in the DoD market?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've been really just very lucky to help support the Department of Defense in its growth into this technology since about 2017. So in 2017, I applied for and got picked up for something called the Naval Innovation Advisory Council, where I was brought in as an independent advisor to the Secretary of the Navy, worked out of MITRE, and was able to leverage their PhDs and their smart guys over there. And what I was really focused on is taking my mission expertise, which was aviation command and control, and then finding ways to apply artificial intelligence so that we can accelerate planning cycles, identify good operational decision space, and really help commanders have the optionality to make better, faster decisions. So what that resulted in was a report and a little piece of software about how you could, implement this capability on a Marine Expeditionary Unit, a MEU, so planning aviation operations faster. The result of that was that I was then kind of selected by the Director of Marine Corps Staff to go stand up the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center. So I was one of the first 20 members at the JAIC. I was one of 3 Marines that kind of helped stand up that organization. Held a couple of different jobs there, but the one that I think is where I was able to kind of help influence and build out quite a bit of a program was called the Joint Warfighting National Mission Initiative. So my part of that was, as an active duty officer, I was the technical monitor for that contract, and I was able to work on a few different programs. One of them on low altitude computer vision. The other one was high altitude autonomy. And the intersection between those two were building the data pipelines and being able to ensure that we had high quality labeled data that could then fuel both of those projects. In August of 2020, I left active duty after serving 12 years and went to MITRE for a short stint, and then came and joined Scale after about 10, 12 months over at MITRE. Started at Scale as an engagement manager, then fleeted up to be a product manager for our first generative AI product called Donovan, which we got onto classified networks. Started experimenting with the combatant commands, experimenting with organizations like Marine Corps University. And then my current role is the head of the public sector division. So I oversee the operations, the go-to-market, the post-sales responsibilities, and the engineering requirements for Scale AI and for the public sector arm of Scale AI.
And I want to get into more about Scale AI, what you all do, but I think a lot of people first heard about the work you're doing with the large Meta, Facebook's parent company, investment of around $14 billion. Could you talk a little bit about that investment and how that enables your ability to deliver on DoD's mission?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Meta took a 49% investment into Scale. Now, Scale continues to be and will continue to be an independent company. So we're not tightly intertwined with Meta in any other way besides the investment. But the way that kind of enables us is it provided quite a bit of an influx in capital that allows us to double down our investments in the pre-training, but mostly the application side of generative AI. So if you look at Scale in its history, we have consistently on the commercial side supported some of the more ambitious AI projects in the world. So autonomous vehicles, where we started. We then kind of pivoted to be able to support the generative AI boom. So that was through supervised fine tuning and reinforcement learning with human feedback. Really what that means is we were providing high quality data to the frontier labs so that their models could get really, really good at specific domains. The benefit is, of course, as a dual use technology company, is I can always pull those lessons learned over to the public sector. A good example of that is some of the early work that we did with the CDAO to provide test and evaluation of generative AI solutions. As we kind of evolve now, we're looking more from focusing primarily on the pre-training and the data side of things to the application side, which is very much where the market is moving. The market, if you look at NVIDIA usage or GPU usage as kind of a marker for that, we are seeing the GPU usage move from primarily pre-training to actual inference. And so that's where scale is kind of moving as well with this investment, is to double down our investments in terms of our forward deployed engineers, our infrastructure, our software development, so we can really have a very robust and capable solution for the US government in an application space. So developing the capabilities so that you can operationalize generative AI. And ThunderForge is a good example of that, of one of the projects that we've recently taken on through DIU to be able to support the actual the actual deployment of generative AI in operational environments.
Yeah, and Dan, we're seeing that exact same thing. We're tagging the data and the analysis for the business development, the growth teams, but absolutely on the same page and seeing the same thing in the market. Let's get more into ThunderForge. Can you talk a little bit more about what you all are doing there? And then after that, I want to get into some of the things you see coming down the road.
Yeah. So ThunderForge is a great opportunity for Scale to kind of help support two combatant commands. So this is primarily right now focused on Indo-PACOM and EUCOM. The intent here is to be able to integrate generative AI and agentic solutions into the staff. So the problem that we're trying to solve is that the staff structure is largely unchanged from the advent of it with Napoleon, right? You take the problem, you divide it up into itty bitty parts, intel, logistics, operations, fires, etc. And then you give that to different individuals that have expertise in that space, and then allow them to kind of build out their plans. All of those plans are then brought together, and then they are, it's on the commander to make a final decision about how to move forward with the operational plans that have been provided. The challenge is that the world has gotten far more complex than Napoleon on a single battlefield. So we brought in electromagnetic, we brought in information, we brought in cyber, you brought in multi-domain of air, land, subsea, surface, et cetera, and so forth. So how is it? So right now it's just building the staff larger and larger in order to, or the headquarters division larger and larger in order to facilitate this added complexity. ThunderForge is the effort to implement generative AI and agentic solutions as an augment to the staff, so that you aren't reliant on humans being the loop. You can now have humans on the loop. So in practice, what that means, or as we kind of continue to deploy this, what it should result in is fewer highly trained individuals supervising multiple agents that are able to kind of help alleviate the cognitive burden to allow commanders to not only make better, faster decisions, but also consider the other levers of national power. So how can the State Department, Treasury, or Commerce kind of help to influence the operational environment so that we are in a proper state of competition as opposed to getting into conflict?
A lot of follow-up questions there. Let's get into a bit more of that, augmenting the HQ staff structure and alleviating some of the cognitive burden, I'm assuming from more administrative tasks, so that can be directed towards better strategic decisions. Can you talk a little bit more about that aspect of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you got to think there's this, within every headquarters, and it's a great acronym, right? Only the DoD can come up with an acronym like this. It's B2C2WGs, right? Boards, bureaus, centers, cells, and working groups.
Very memorable.
Now, while this is the pointy end of the spear in terms of like what's happening at the combatant command, it is still largely kind of surrounding staff work, which is reading information, pulling in data, pulling in reports, distilling them, writing them, organizing them, and then passing them up to make an informed decision. So we're not involved in anything in terms of like a direct kill chain, but we are trying to help move the whole process along faster so that fewer people are stuck with, as a Marine, what I would call like the skull dragging work of like actually building out the capability and informing the decision makers effectively. So, to make this more tangible, I remember coming into the staff when I was still in uniform at like 06, because I had to take everything that was done over the night watch, aggregate it, put it into a proper PowerPoint, make sure that I had everything like checked, and then be able to brief the commander by 09. Now at 09, something has changed between 06 and 09, and now I'm kind of stuck on a back foot for when the commander has more information than I do, asks a question that I'm not prepared to answer. The idea is with agentic AI and the ability to consistently suck in information and then make sense of it, we're hoping to augment the staff so that they're not stuck in that kind of like, that loop.
So what would that look like? That was a 3-hour gap of that analysis, probably reading a lot of documents, synthesizing intelligence. What would that look like now, or what do you all anticipate the role of that soldier being when they show up at 6 a.m. there?
Yeah, so I could certainly see a world where the agent is out constantly pulling in information, aggregating it. It's probably in some cases reaching out to additional tools like simulators. So if it identified as a general scenario that there's unusual fishing activity off the coast of a certain country, what does that mean? Does it trigger a CCIR? If it triggers a CCIR, a commander's critical information requirement, what are the options the commander can take? And so instead of me just providing the overview of there was suspicious fishing off the coast of this country, now the staff is able to think at a higher level. What can the commander do about it? Which includes pulling in information about where are current U.S. forces, what are the options that those U.S. forces can provide the commander, and then being able to simulate those in an effective manner to then provide a more holistic solution at 09, as opposed to just the small bite and then expecting the commander to then be able to make the next follow-on decisions or aggregate additional information.
And I would see even the options for the commander would be pre-generated so that the soldier's role would become reviewing those and maybe supplementing them. Dan, you mentioned this phrase kind of quickly, human in the loop AI and human on the loop AI. Could you talk a little bit about how you all define that and what you see as a difference between those two models?
Yeah, so when I think human is the loop, what we're referring to there is for any decision to be made, it requires a human to turn around, talk to someone else, email someone else, chat someone else, pull that information in, to physically do every part of the information gathering, information distilling, and information moving up the DIKW chain. So to move from data to information to knowledge to wisdom is just every single step of the way. Some human has to be able to read, understand, distill, and build. So you're limited by how many interactions a human can have on any given day and how much that person can read and understand and keep in their head. The idea of moving humans to be on the loop means that instead of doing all of that work, the agent is able to pull that information in. You're able to kind of build this architecture of smaller, fine-tuned models and agents that interact with each other. So it's not one big black box, but it's probably multiple smaller black boxes that what information went in, what information came out. Now, you're not going to be able to have full trust in it, but that's why you need humans to be integrated into the process and observing the overall system. So the idea is that you're able to do more with the same people that you have, or do more with fewer people in the event of operating in a more constrained environment.
I want to get into what the future of agentic warfare will look like, but first, what do you see as the future of the combatant commands? Forecasting ahead, what might the operations of a combatant command look like 1 year from now?
Yeah, I think that what we're likely to see is kind of like slow, steady evolution of the staff to the point where at some point there's a knee in the curve, and then we see a real takeoff in terms of capability. When we talk about what we see in the next year, what I would hope is that we adopt some of these technologies effectively. In a systems approach of multiple different vendors being able to provide solutions. And the staff is able to provide better, more in-depth optionality to the commander, as opposed to the current paradigm, which is usually I have 3 COAs that I'm going to provide the commander. One that I really want to move forward with, one that's kind of workable, but there's going to be some real big trade-offs, and then the third that's completely unworkable, that's a throwaway. So the idea is that perhaps we're not talking about providing those 3 COAs and letting the commander decide. Instead, we're thinking of things more dynamically. So as things are changing in real time in the brief, there's think of it as like a slider or as a trade-off decision that could be made so that these plans can be automatically rebuilt with all the new information available and with all the context and questions that the commander is providing.
And then any thoughts on which combatant command might be at the forefront of this, or how that adoption or change might take place?
So I've seen all the combatant commands kind of lean forward on this adoption of new technology. So I don't think that there's one that's like running far ahead of the others. I think what will dictate this is kind of the requirements of the national security environment. So I think of like the early 90s, I think most people would have been focused on EUCOM or potentially, another or NORTHCOM as like the key combatant commands to think about until Saddam Hussein invaded Iraq. And then all of a sudden, the area where we saw the first real operational implications of the precision strike complex was in the Gulf War in the early 90s. So I think national security will kind of like dictate the terms of this, and which is why I think it's so important that all the combatant commands are kind of moving out on this together, are sharing the lessons learned. Again, this is why I think that the Thunder Forge contract, the way that DIU kind of constructed it, is so valuable, is that there are two combatant commands involved as opposed to a single one.
And is it structured in a way that the other COCOMs could learn from the experience of the two you're operating with right now?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's lessons learned that we can not only pull from the Thunder Forge solution, but also we are supporting through the CDAO, the guide series of events. So it's another place for experimentation. The other area that, Scale is very deeply involved in is like Marine Corps University. The value there is that, the officers that go through MCU, the School of Advanced Warfighting, Command and Staff, their next posting is usually at a combatant command or at a headquarters division. So they're able to kind of like experiment with doctrine, experiment with the way that doctrine should evolve as leveraging these technologies in a academic environment, and then take those learnings forward with them.
Let's move on to the future of agentic warfare. I'll just start high level with that question, Dan. Yeah. What does the future of agentic warfare look like?
So there's a few different ways to kind of think about this. There's the what is the staff, and how do we look at it from like ourselves, and how does the operational environment change? I think it might make sense to think about like, how does the operational environment change first as a result of these technologies? This is fundamentally different than what we've seen in the past with like nuclear proliferation or anything else, where it was very controlled into how it got out into to other countries, to other organizations. So the proliferation of this means that the operational environment is going to change. We're going to see the decision cycles of some of our competitors and adversaries accelerate as they start to adopt and experiment with this technology. I think we're going to see the same capability kind of like proliferate within the US government. So the question is, who's going to best implement it effectively? So how does their doctrine adapt so that they can best leverage the technology? A good framework that Scale always kind of adopts is people, process, and technology. So if we're implementing this technology, the thing that's going to make the difference is not just the tech by itself in a vacuum, but how do the other two knobs of process or doctrine and people in terms of training, how does that evolve to best leverage the capability? So I think we're going to see operational tempos increase, and we're going to see new kind of emergent behavior from the system.
And when I hear agentic warfare, first thing I think about is something like a Black Mirror episode with autonomous robots, drones, robot dogs, attacking each other with AI algorithms controlling them. What's your reaction to that? What are your thoughts on that, or where does your mind go to what the future of agentic warfare might actually look like?
So I think the key with any kind of autonomous system is, again, going back to people, process, technology. If I provide this very capable autonomous system, but I link it or I shackle it to the existing planning process, then I'm already kind of like giving away some of the combat capabilities that system provides. So if you deploy it and use it the exact same way, then you don't really get that added benefit. So in the future, what I would expect is that the staff remains the same, but changes the way that they operate with this new technology. And that the implementation of autonomous systems will still involve a human very tightly integrated into the loop, but the planning pace at which those things can be deployed will increase exponentially.
Next thing I want to go to is maybe back a little bit to that role of the human. So talking about the staffing, what do you see as the role of the humans at the combatant commands in that type of an environment? And is it the same headcount number? Is it the same staff retrained? Does this require a totally different skill set? What are you thinking the effects will be on that? The first P you guys shared, the people.
Yeah, I think that there's probably a world in which eventually the staff structure kind of like shrinks. So over the course of 20 years of coin operations, I think we've seen the staff and the headquarters section grow and grow and grow and grow to help deal with the complexity. Now that we're in this state of like competition versus conflict, and the national strategic objectives are more globally focused as opposed to regionally, I think what we're likely to see is the staff will kind of find a balancing act, or the headquarters will find a balancing act. I don't think that this headquarters sections will continue to grow at the rate that they have been growing. I also don't think they're going to shrink to 5 people, each representing a section of the J directorates and being able to help inform the commander. There will probably be some happy medium, and then the key is that the ability for them to make a decision that is more effective and faster will not be dependent on how many people they have in their section. Does that kind of make sense? Or
absolutely, no, absolutely. One other question that comes to mind then is interoperability. Mm-hmm. How do you see this? This is great as a standalone modular solution to deliver on a mission objective. How does this work with legacy systems or even some obsolete technologies that are still part of the defense market?
Yeah, so this is one of the areas where I'm actually the most excited about for agentic solutions, is because they have the ability to use tools, which means that if there is a piece of software that already exists that has an API that we can write an API to, it means that we can integrate with that system. So that means that the best way for this capability to be evolved or implemented is with a systems approach. So not a single verticalized solution where one vendor owns every aspect of it, but it really is bringing in the best capabilities of different vendors, of different capabilities, of different systems of record, being able to connect those and implement them effectively in an orchestration manner. So I think this is another very interesting area of like how the defense industrial base will probably need to evolve, is that no single vendor should own too much of this. And it should be a situation where you have companies like Scale or others that are very good at orchestrating and pulling these capabilities together, and then being able to then run test and evaluation on them, help with the data tuning so that the models get more effective over time when you identify failure modes. And then the last part of that is how do we then help inform how the doctrine and the people need to be trained and adapted to best leverage the capability.
So you have been both inside DoD as well as now with industry. What advice or suggestions would you have for current DoD staff on how they can best harness, access the innovation from tech companies like Scale AI to deliver on their mission priorities?
Yeah, so when I think about this, I've seen a lot of really great movement and memos that have come out of the Department of Defense. So the idea of leveraging not like CSOs and OTA contracts as opposed to traditional software pathways, I think is a great step forward. And you should really be thinking about this, or as a government buyer, thinking about this not from the perspective of what is the one company that's going to give me the end-to-end solution that I want, but what are the collection of companies that can be, if brought together, really provide a meaningful impact on the mission that I'm trying to go with. So using those non-traditional software pathways, thinking about it from the perspective of how much can the vendor provide, how much does the government need to provide oversight of, I think is another key aspect to kind of think about. So the government doesn't need to always dictate the software architecture for what needs to be built, but they should be dictating like things like statement of objectives and systems that are that exist that they would want a non-traditional vendor to come in and be able to integrate with.
And then as DoD looks to grow their industrial base, strengthen their industrial base, and bring in new partners, presumably, especially with the new innovative partners, what would your suggestion be to a tech startup in Austin or Colorado or California that is interested in this market in terms of what should they know about working with government?
I think that if you're a very small tech startup right now and you don't have the added benefit of already having a facility clearance and running on the right networks and being able to work on against the right data, I think the way that I would kind of approach that is thinking more about partnerships and integration as opposed to trying to go direct to government sales. I think direct to government sales is something that will be valuable for any company as they kind of pursue this, but the barriers to entry in terms of even if you were to get a CIBR contract or a CSO contract, being able to effectively deliver against it in the constraints of the US government are always very challenging. It's challenging for companies that have even been more established like ourselves. But there is a world in which partnership and collaboration make a lot more sense in terms of bringing a capability to the government that is greater than the sum of its parts, and also is easier to adopt for the government because they don't feel that they have to make a trade-off decision about, which vendor they should be going with.
Now, looking ahead, you touched on this a few times, but what does the future of scale AI look like in the defense market?
Yeah, well, we're growing pretty quickly, and we're always looking to bring on talented individuals. I think what the future of scale AI as of right now is really looking more and more into the application space and being able to build capabilities that are very flexible and very easy to integrate into existing systems of record and programs that are already out there. So again, Thunderforge is a good example. There's other examples that we've been able to work with vendors that are already in the ecosystem to be able to deliver really interesting capabilities that can be rapidly integrated with and deployed.
Well, as we wrap up here then, I always like to ask, so what? What's the so what that you'd like to leave industry and DoD with from this conversation?
Yeah, I think that, as we kind of move forward, what I've seen with artificial intelligence, either computer vision or generative AI, is it really does not work in the traditional SaaS model. Now, there are probably some areas where I'm wrong about this, but for the most part, what I've seen is that you can't expect your customer to have a single software solution that they just purchase as a SaaS license and then they're off to the races and running. Instead, you really have to think about how does it integrate and how does it align with the individual workflows that are already in place. Because the intent is to not have the user give up on the workflow or the doctrine that is currently there. It's to give a capability that can slowly evolve the doctrine through practice, through integration, in the same way that I think any of the technologies that the US government has adopted. It's never like zero to a Columbia-class submarine. It's a steady evolution of a capability that evolves with the doctrine and requirements of the U.S. government.
All right. Well, how can people get in touch with you and your team, especially some of the talented individuals that might want to work with you all and support your mission? Yeah.
So LinkedIn's always a good resource. And then, of course, scale.com. We have a public sector website on there. We post plenty of new opportunities that we have there. And we're looking to grow in the DC, the San Francisco, and the St. Louis area.
All right. Well, Dan, thanks a lot for being on the show today, talking about Scale AI's work. Very interesting. I think there's a lot changing here and a lot happening. So look forward to staying in touch over the coming months and coming years as the market and the DoD needs continue to evolve.
Absolutely. Great talking with you today, Mike.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you for tuning in to the GovDiscovery AI podcast with Mike Shanley. GovDiscovery AI leverages our team's decade of experience winning federal funding to deliver federal growth intel to sales, proposal, and capture teams working in defense and civilian markets. Each market intel report is delivered by federal growth experts leveraging our proprietary deep data discovery process. If you enjoyed today's show, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and connect with GovDiscovery AI and Mike Shanley on LinkedIn or learn more at govdiscoveryai.com.